It says it's for preparing the string.
Preparing.
Yes, but I am, yeah, they'll get some pre-talk.
Okay, no problem. No, look, I'm all tangled up here.
Alrighty. The string.
Preparing.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. This is Sydney Walker with Coffee and Politics 101, and we're taking a little bit of a divergence. And good morning, everyone. This is
Getting a little bit of echo, I think.
Sydney Walker with Coffee and Politics. So that is on my end that I'm echoing here. So I do apologize for that. And we're still working out some of the technical nuances. We're going live on YouTube, but good morning, everyone. It's Saturday morning, and we're taking a little bit of a divergence with discussing mental health, specifically trauma and PTSD. So this morning I have Dr. Alaluna Curry on. So good morning, and thank you for coming on the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here on this lovely Saturday morning.
Yes, we are expecting rain here in Dallas. Yeah, as long as it's not frigid. That's all we're concerned with. There's no frigid temperatures.
Yes, so, as long as it's not cold.
Yes. So we were introduced via my state rep, Jasmine Crockett, your dear friend. And you brought up some very interesting points while we were talking about the presidential campaign and all of the misinformation and how people were having some traumatic experiences or potentially traumatic experiences online or dealing with family. And you brought a very different approach with dealing with those kinds of situations. So I want to really focus in on, what is trauma and what defines it, and PTSD and the symptoms, and if someone should have a loved one who's experiencing this and how we can support them. So just to give you guys a little bit of background of Dr. Curry, she is a board certified psychiatrist. And she is no longer in the patient care avenue of things, which I completely understand as a former dietitian here, and more on the teaching side of the house. So please, I want you to toot your horn, because I absolutely love these conversations about how we can support each other with our mental health.
Yes, absolutely. So the reason that I'm on the education side is that there's only literally one trauma psychiatrist, me.
Oh, wow.
And it's something that I coined because I began to see this huge blind spot that we have in the mental health and medical industry, and really in the world, for what psychological trauma is and how pervasive it is in our society. And this is something that developed in my understanding over the years. It wasn't what I was taught or how I was taught to think in medical school or psychiatry residency, or, even in practice, even though I was practicing at the VA and I was taking care of male and female veterans, and even in a specialty unit for trauma. And, we had this external bar. Like, most of the time when I say trauma, people think, oh, something that you got physically hit, or
Right.
military or combat, right. War. You gotta have had your body violated. But trauma, most trauma, 99% of trauma is psychological. It's not necessarily someone physically touching you, but it is brought on by words. It's brought on by actions or deeds. It might even be brought on by the perception that you have of what's going on in the environment. Yes, you can traumatize yourself. But there are, yes, note to self. The way that you read or interpret something can be experienced internally as traumatizing. So when we start kind of pulling back from the traditional definition that sets this external bar for trauma, you ask the individual, what was hurtful to you? What thing, and this is how I define it. any experience that is internally so negative that it changes the way you think about yourself, other people, and the world. And so, for example, you could DSM-5 is our diagnostic Bible. That's what we reference for the codes. But you will not find a relationship breakup in there, right? But how many people have been traumatized by relationships that fell apart, violations that happen, and then when you go into the next thing, you're afraid of it happening again. You might accuse
You're
another
bringing
person
all
of
of
doing
that with you.
exactly,
Yes.
bringing all that baggage with you, recreating precisely what you don't want to create, having all kinds of physiological reactions or responses. So what I began to recognize is that everyone experiences psychological trauma at some point in their life. It
Okay.
is, it's not if, it's when.
When
Yeah, you live long enough, you got it.
we're
And
gonna
some of
experience
us, we're getting it at birth. Some of us are bringing it from ancestral and hereditary traumas before we even get here. Okay.
yes, yes.
So, being a Black person in America, it's traumatizing. You may not always realize how it's affecting you, but it doesn't, you can't swim in water and not get wet,
Right.
is what I tell people. So now that does not mean necessarily that everyone is going to be damaged long term by those traumas, but certainly it can be experienced as psychologically traumatic. And when you are going through the world, I mean, there could be car accidents, there could be failing a test, there could be
Yes.
not being selected for a position or being passed over for a promotion or losing your job. Economic stress and poverty are traumatic. Our politics, I mean, when you're a person who's experienced racism and then you hear leaders and people who are making decisions for us say that racism doesn't exist, that's
Traumatic.
invalidating,
Yeah.
right? That's traumatic to have someone tell you that your experience is not what you're experiencing, that your internal reality is not what it should be. There's lots of LGBTQ individuals who are invalidated by their world or by various households, the religions. I mean, there's so many things that cause,
And just to talk about groups,
yeah,
women and women in the
women.
workplace with
Absolutely.
all forms of harassment. And I did a show on the normalization of bullying and
Hmm.
how even in our culture, we play the dozens, we do the
Yeah.
ribbing with each other,
Oh.
we pass down these, habits that we've
Hmm.
picked up from family and continue the cycle. And as you pointed out, that not everyone is going to have life long-term damaging effects of it, but live
It
long
doesn't.
enough, live long enough, we're going to
Yeah.
experience it.
And it
So,
causes desensitization as well. So just
okay,
because you are, just because you're used to people joning and playing the dozens or calling names and talking about you, and you learn to have high mental defenses for it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not causing some internal pain, some
okay.
stinging, some, damage. And it also doesn't mean that it's healthy to have that high level of desensitization to how other people affect your emotions.
That is very good to hear that because, you know, the author that I had on, I had to kind of step back and look at, am I still doing those types of things and
Mhm.
causing emotional harm to someone, all in the guise of joking around?
Yeah.
And, I always try to instill in my kids and in myself, living by that golden rule that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it just doesn't seem like, we have this world or country, state,
Yeah.
city that practices that. So seeing that, because it sounds like trauma is very individualized as
Mhm.
far as the individual that feels it
Mhm.
and their response to it. And it seems like, and I do want to take a moment to talk about our veterans, because of their experiences with being deployed and going to wars, going to military operations, and what they see, they have actually brought the attention to PTSD.
Sure.
And now it's becoming more of a household word, and people, understand that, someone can get into that loop, as you were discussing, you have a breakup and it did not go amicably, and you're bringing those things into your new relationship because you don't want to repeat those experiences. And so sometimes it's really hard when you're in the middle of the storm, as I like to call it, to see that you are living out the past, although it feels like the moment.
Yeah.
So can you talk about, that? Because that's really complex.
Well, let's also acknowledge that most veterans have experienced, when we talk about trauma, we're talking about something that piles up and piles on. So many
Yes.
people, even before they went into the military, or even might have been why they went into the military, to get away from some of the trauma that they might be experiencing
Yes.
in their household, in their life. And a lot of veterans even believe, before I get a chance to re-educate them, that unless they are physically injured in combat, that they have not experienced trauma. But you don't have to, even to be in a war zone is traumatic, to have your base shot at and drills and things like that. You may not have ever been technically close to dying, but there's still trauma within the experience of being deployed, or even boot camp. Shit, somebody yelling in your face, cussing you out, telling there's trauma inherent in the way that our society is set up right now. But in particular, PTSD is a specific syndrome that has 4 components to it. So the first component is re-experiencing. And re-experiencing can be nightmares, it can be flashbacks, it can be like there you can smell something that reminds you, that takes your mind back to a certain incident, or hear sounds or other things, and your body recreates the experience that you had, even though it's not happening in real time. It can be very powerfully be experienced that way. Now, some people literally, they can be driving their car and then look around and they feel like they're back in Kandahar, but for other people, it's not that full immersive experience, but it can just be all of a sudden my body is recreating an emotion of what I would have felt before, and it's happening in real time. So they don't necessarily understand that it's coming from their brain, and it can make them feel crazy because like I'm experiencing something that the other people around me are not
seeing. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Feeling.
And so the second component is avoidance. When you're having that type of intense experience, then you may start avoiding things that you think may trigger that. So that may be, I start changing my life where, for example, they may go to the store, and in the store, somebody is just kind of following a little bit too close behind them, or bumps into them, or you see your brain picks up on something over in the corner, and your body is now recreating this internal experience. You're having a panic attack, you're out in the parking lot, you're gone, you're like, I'm never going back to Walmart, it's dangerous in there.
Yes.
And it's not consistent with reality, but what their brain has showed them and reinforced to them that all of these things are unsafe. Crowds and other spaces, or even conversations or talking about situations that happen, it's so likely to bring up painful experiences internally that they start to change how they operate. And then the third part is having what we call negative distortions of thoughts and emotions. So where they begin to not engage in things that used to cause them happiness or pleasure, or thinking that the whole world and other people are shady or shifty, or doing a lot of generalization and stereotyping, like all of these Middle Eastern people or all of these,
Yes.
XYZ are this way. And
Yes.
then fourth, they have physical experiences that are consistent with what you would, if you're thinking that way, it's going to be present in your body. So I tell them like they're wound up tighter because their cortisol is higher, their stress response is higher, so they might be more irritable, more jumpy, more snappy, more likely to be explosive in their emotions or have mood swings. So that's kind of the four-part constellation that we look for with PTSD. And of course, the more traumatic things you've been through or the more extreme that those traumas have been, the more that you might be affected by your brain recreating some of those experiences that we talk about. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important to have a brain-based education. So this is my
Okay.
favorite little thing is my
I
illustration.
love it.
This is the amygdala, and your amygdala is a big part. And I teach them there are 6 primitive brain systems that affect every person who experiences trauma. So even
Okay.
though it's individual experience, the good
Yes.
news is that all our brains pretty much work the same way. So if you
That's great.
understand how your brain is processing information and
Yes.
transmitting the experience to you, then you have a better chance of being able to pop that trauma bubble of how you're perceiving the world and be able to recalibrate what your mind is telling you. Therefore, what feelings are being created. Therefore, how you would respond to the environment.
Gosh, that is a lot to take in, that there's
Yeah,
so much going on. And as much as we, try to be empathetic and sympathetic to people, I can see how some individuals would be really dismissive about this and just say, oh, that happened then.
yeah.
That's not
I
going
can't
on.
get over it. Yeah,
Get over it. I
yeah,
heard that a lot, especially when it comes to racism and slavery. But even as females, and there's a lot going on in the news with sexual harassment, especially in the state of New York.
mhm,
And we have had the resurgence of bringing that to the forefront. And being a woman, I've been in corporate America before, and trying to explain to someone that this is going on and how uncomfortable it makes you feel can be a hard line to walk
absolutely.
when all you want is to be protected in that space and feel safe in your workplace.
Yeah. I think we have to acknowledge that we have an emotionally incompetent society. I say I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm out for real. But I'm not. I jokingly say humans are incompetent, emotionally incompetent creatures, but I actually mean that.
Right.
Our society is built on primitive concepts and primitive ways of thinking and doing things that absolutely lack empathy. Empathy meaning the ability to appreciate not just the feelings and the emotions of the other person, but the experience of the other person, and that allowing their reality to be, although it's different from yours,
Right.
treated equal to yours. Their
Right.
pain, their experiences, their perspective is just as real to them as yours is to you, and to be able to operate in that way. So right now, if you think about even how America was founded in
In a
trauma.
violent
But
manner.
yeah, in violence, right? The society, absolutely. I mean, if you look at documented human history right now, pretty much what we do is very tribal. We have the out tribes and the in tribes, and whoever can, kill or suppress or, has the most firepower can do whatever they want to these
Yeah.
other people. And
Yes.
so even the people who founded America were running from persecution and trauma. And then they brought their butts over here, our wonderful founding mothers and fathers, and came over here and looked at humans who were shaped just like them, eyes in the same place, hair on top of their head, can even make babies with them. But oh, these Native Americans, we can kill them and take their land, and these Africans, we can enslave them and make them build this for us and do our dirty work.
Yes.
So, you know, our entire process has been an evolution, as we have. But now, the interesting thing is that what has been so painful over the years in its history for so many people also has created this amazing world that we have right now that's very advanced about our external technology, but we're not advanced on our understanding of our internal technology. We get
Okay.
no education about, you know, people still say, you make me mad or she makes me happy. Emotions come from your heart. No, they don't. They don't
Right.
come from your gut. They,
Right.
if you don't know how your brain works, you don't know that you have, for example, a reticular activating system. All of us have a RAS or a filter that's helping us to hone in on certain things and tune out other things in our life
Okay.
and in our mind so that we, you know, your brain can't process everything in the environment. But so we all have a tendency to think that how we experience the world is reality, and it's not. Just
It's
like
just our perception
it's
of it.
just our perception. It's what our brain can interpret. It's the words and the labels and the experiences that we've had that allows us to look at something and draw a conclusion. But for example, your RAS, like if you ever decided that you like a certain car, you think you want to buy a car, you might see that car start popping up all over the road
Yes.
because now
Yes.
your brain alerts to that. That's your reticular activating system. But it also does that with trauma. So if you've ever been cheated on or assaulted
Yes.
or the victim of a crime or had a racist experience or had a sexist experience, now your mind is going to be filtering the environment, looking for the potential for that thing and highlighting it for you so that you can be prepared or avoid it or try to not recreate that problem. But the only issue is that we have so much of that. Now we are all in a space where our minds and our brains are honed on the negative and more likely to see things where they are not or
Okay.
expand our experience of things when they do happen.
Okay, that's a very good point. If you're just tuning in, we have Dr. Curry talking about trauma and how our brain works. And we will come to the point where, you know, what can we do for ourselves? But if we know someone that's close to us, a loved one, a coworker, a friend that may be experiencing this, what can we do to help them in their journey as they move to a place of healing and recovery? um, you know, listening to how the brain adapts and puts those processes in place that it's wired to do, because the brain is beautiful, is great. It keeps us breathing, our heart rate going, all on its own without us literally having to say, okay, I need to breathe. Okay, heart, I need you to pump. So trauma can be a one-time event, witnessing someone being shot, and you're a bystander on the street, walking down the street, and you see this. A car wreck can be traumatic. But let's talk about some situations that can be even more insidious, as I like to call it, and long term. And one thing that I found that was very interesting is learning about domestic violence and how that whole cycle of, you know, an incident, the shoe drops, there's a blow up, there's the apology, and then the honeymoon. And the old saying, the first time you do it, shame on me, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. And people who are in relationships with an abuser, you know, kind of give a lot of allowances with those behaviors and want to believe in the best in the person and that change is going to come. And the statistics say that, you know, it takes 7 attempts for the victim to actually leave their abuser. So we're talking about not weeks, not months, we could be talking about years, more than a decade that you've been with this person. And so all of the psychological games, the financial abuse, sexual abuse, not just them putting their hands on you, because I will say abusers are becoming more sophisticated, not necessarily going the beat you up, send you to work with a black eye, and you're trying to put your cover girl over it. That long exposure to those tactics and definitely experiences triggering and having flashbacks, and also the children that are witnessing this, that can be a lot to unpack and for people to understand, because they're like, just leave. And it's not necessarily that
Well, that in
easy.
itself is an invalidating statement, right?
Yes.
It invalidates the experience that the individual has. So I think of everything in a brain-based way.
Okay.
So when I think of domestic violence, three systems that I think are highly involved in that. We talked about the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that creates our emotions. It creates our positive and negative emotions, everything from joy, happiness, love, shame, anger, fear. All of those things come out of that same little part of your brain and create visible and powerful urges to do or say something, or not do or say something. And it's always at work. Men have an amygdala, women have an amygdala. So there's no such thing as men not having emotions or women being overly emotional. All that is just bullshit.
Great. Thank you for saying that.
Welcome. And it is the fact that we have those type of myths are part of why we have difficulty identifying how much our emotions are actually affecting the way that we think or respond to something at any given moment. The next brain system is the somatosensory cortex. There is a part of your brain that registers pain, and the somatosensory cortex does not differentiate between physical pain and psychological pain.
Really?
No, doesn't differentiate. So from the standpoint of, like, if I'm standing on a hot coal, my foot's going to send me a pain signal like, move, dummy, you know. But when we're in a world that, like, if you grow up and, you know, your family members like, oh, you fat, you know, look at you gaining weight, right? So then you're in a relationship and you're hearing those type of things. When are you going to lose weight? You're fat, or why aren't you doing this and that? Like, you feel that sting, that your somatosensory cortex.
Yep, right.
But we're in a society that negates things that we can't see. We ignore emotions, we ignore psychological pain, we ignore those things as if they're all in the head. I'm like, in the brain, yeah, but it's not just all in your head. You are literally feeling the psychological slap. So a lot of the pain and injury that people cause, that's why I call trauma the invisible wound. And that's why it's such a big black hole, ridiculous deficit that we have in our society. Because if I acknowledge that my words might be what's damaging you, or even my facial expression, my body posture, or, you know, me keeping you from having the resources you need, or being able to pursue something that you want, or being connected to your family, people think, oh, well, they're not hitting me, so it's not as bad. Or they might have just, he lost his temper, she lost her temper, she hit me once, or, you know. And then when everything calms down, after that amygdala calms down, oh, I'm so sorry, I love you, I'll never do it again, you know, you just make me so mad, right? And that is not how it works. Whatever you are telling yourself about what that person is doing is what's creating the emotion inside of your body. So we're not taught responsibility and for our own emotional control, and that we are the ones, it's happening inside of you. It ain't the devil. It ain't no demon possession. It ain't God doing it to you. It's your amygdala. It's your brain that's creating, and what you're telling yourself that's creating that powerful emotion inside of you. And then most people just run with it. And that last system that's very much involved with domestic violence situations is the brain reward system, the addiction system. So
Okay.
dopamine is a chemical that our body puts out anytime we have something that feels good. Okay. So, you get a burst of dopamine when you eat some candy or when you eat food when you're hungry. We get
Or the
dopamine.
runner's high.
Yes, when somebody's beautiful, sexy, when you're having orgasms, when you're drinking alcohol, tobacco, weed, all of those things, they trigger dopamine. And your
Okay.
significant other is also an addiction. All of us, have these. That's why when you're apart from somebody, you might miss them. You want to call them, talk, and you go through withdrawal from them. So also
So
that
you
brings.
just explained why it takes so many attempts
Mhm.
to leave, because that whole dopamine, you want them to be sorry, you want them to change. You're hoping for that love to still be there.
Mhm.
And you're trying to find every reason, every excuse in the book to hang on to the relationship.
Yeah.
And, for my people out there that may know someone who is in a domestic violence situation, it is not just a matter of leave. There are other factors that are in play. And Dr. Curry has explained the huge one, the brain that's playing its role inside of this. But, there will have to be a period of retraining the brain
Mhm.
with healing from that situation. And so I do want to kind of get into the politics of this, because even though our veterans have brought trauma and the effects of it to our doorstep, that now is being more socially talked about and recognized,
Mhm.
but it took a long time to get there. And one thing that you said that I thought was so powerful is that, it didn't leave any bruises, cuts, broken bones. There was nothing physically changed about me as a result of the trauma. And so people are dismissive, and even in your field, there took a long time to recognize. And you guys, that's your whole job, is understanding the brain and
Did
helping.
a whole lot of school for it, still paying for it, got a whole bunch of degrees, and it still wasn't in the curriculum. Yeah.
Yes, and still, trying to get that recognition, get that, code. And unfortunately, that's what it's all about. Can I code for this? Can I bill somebody for this treatment program? And I don't want to say, that yes, it's invisible, so that's why we didn't take it seriously. But with you guys being the brain experts on the emotional side of it, on how we think, how we process information, what was the barrier there with saying, yes, there is something that goes on when a traumatic experience or receiving those traumatic experiences continuously over a long period of time, and what those effects show up as?
Yeah, I think that personally, I believe that the technology had to evolve for us to even gain this understanding. I just happened to be the person who put the pieces together
Okay.
and was able to recognize what happened because I just had a really unique role that combined all of these evidence-based treatments with the research, the translational research for information that was coming down the pipeline. So I mean, I
Okay.
was reading the papers and the research papers and really involved in that aspect of it. So
Okay.
like we didn't have MRIs and PET scans and some of the technology that has allowed us to have this understanding of what the reticular activating system and the amygdala and the somatosensory cortex did.
Okay.
And so now that we have that data, it still has to get integrated into the way the larger society thinks. So I use the example of society is constantly evolving. There was a time where they were killing people for saying that the earth wasn't the center of the universe, right?
Yes.
Now we're all like, oh, third rock from the sun, we're on our revolutions and all that stuff. But that took thousands of years for them to actually accept that as common knowledge. And I think that we're still in a space where we're right on the verge of making this information common knowledge, but we're not there for sure. It really is starting now.
Okay.
Because, for example, the Human Genome Project came out in 2003 or was finished in 2003. And the Human Genome Project determined that they looked at the DNA codes of humans, and they understood now that we're 99.9% the same, all of us. So out of 6 billion pieces of DNA, only 0.1% of those are different between me and you and Bob and John and Jenny and Karen and whoever. And
Right.
so when it even irks me now when I see things like multiple races. I'm like, that's not a thing. There's
Right.
one race with a bunch of different ethnicities and cultures that have developed after our, human, what has become what we know as Homo sapien was planted in Africa and then has spread out across the world and has
Right.
shifted externally based on the factors of
The
the environment.
environment that they're in. Yes.
Right. But this concept that there's a black and a white and an Asian and a what, I mean, all of these things are sort of social concepts that we believe so deeply that we make real. So the important thing to understand is, number one, trauma is programming, and it's also treatable. So
Okay.
it's one of those things where when you've been taught through your life experiences to think of things a certain way, especially when you run into pain points to say, hey, this is how you're supposed to think, then it deeply affects what you believe and how you believe it. And those beliefs will be, if enough people believe them and reinforce those beliefs, then they become manifest in our world.
Oh,
So
wow.
we are still primitive in the way that we think of ourselves. We don't think of every person as a spiritual being having a human experience, or as I say, anatomically, we're animal, human, and spirit. That's all of us are built that way. And no matter what happens to you, I hear people say, oh, I'm a monster. I can't feel my emotions. I sold my soul. I this, that, and all those things, bullshit.
They're playing games with themselves
Yeah,
first.
well, exactly, but it's also been reinforced by an environment that often has told them through a lot of pain points that that's how they're
That they're a
supposed to think
monster.
about. Exactly.
Wow.
So, there's so many. Trauma is a belief-based condition. You might experience something negative, but what you tell yourself about that thing and what you conclude about yourself or about the world is what has a big impact on your decision making in the now, that's referencing all these pain points from the past and helping you're either creating, you're either going to create the primitive stuff or you're going to create the evolved stuff. So like, this is your prefrontal cortex, this part behind your forehead. This is the most evolved part of your brain. This is the part that we're only using 10 to 15% of the capacity of the most evolved part of our brain. And
Wow.
and that's just our default. No matter the success level, no matter the finance level, no matter the education level, when you are not taught about your brain, I believe this should be taught at elementary school, junior high,
Yes.
high school, because when you learn about elbow, you should be learning about amygdala, because your
Yes.
amygdala is doing something every second of your life. Even when you're asleep, your brain is working. And
It
so
is it's a
yeah,
workhorse of our brain.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, gosh, we have 20 minutes. And I'm saying to myself, I want to go in deeper and more. And wow, it blows me away
Yeah.
that there's so much going on, because you have me, while you're talking, I'm having all of these thoughts popping up with how we're trained. And my youngest, we have a saying in the house that we don't use the B word, which is bad. Nobody gets the T word, which is trouble. No one gets feels the M word, mad, and we don't do the H word, hit, because he was hearing at school, I'm a bad boy, getting in trouble, and if someone became mad, what he perceived as being mad, he literally would ball up and try to hide somewhere. And making me think about, our suspension rate of our Black boys in our school systems and the resources that aren't there, and how, patience has to be operating all the time for us. And that's why, I spoke to you during Jasmine's campaign, because you lead with empathy. That's what you told all of us to do during the discussion with confronting someone or having dialogue with someone around politics. And although it may not align with your belief system, having empathy so you can have the conversation and gain more understanding with each other, versus what we see a lot of is keyboard warriors and being called an idiot, Democrat, or just, any of these names that people have been using on social media. So really talk about how we can heal the brain, because a lot of times, a lot of us want a pill to swallow because that's just easy. There's no work involved in that other than setting an alert on your phone and remembering to take your Zoloft, your Paxil, Seroquel, whatever it is, to treat what's going on with you.
Yeah, well, you can only take those, once or twice a day, maybe 3 times max, and you might get pissed off 10 times a day. So, we can't substitute medications for, true mindfulness and mental health, mental wellness. And I believe that the deficit of education that we have about this means that you have a bunch of people running around who have no idea what's going on in their head, how their biology is driving a lot of their behaviors and decision making, and therefore we continue to clash. So one of the reasons that I brought up empathy is that number one, we can turn on any television today and you can hear people call names. You can hear, it's just, and it's been even more increased in our society where people reference each other as Dems and libs and Republicans and conservatives and all those kind of things, snowflakes and what have you. But the reality is that every single one of us has I call humans walking amygdalas. We're not the Walking Dead, we're the walking amygdalas.
You at least they're not the Walking Dead.
Yeah, well, in a sense, there is a level of destruction that comes with not being able to communicate in a way that's not slapping the other person as you're talking to them, which is activating their defensiveness, activating their animal, right? And so and I tell people, it took me a minute. I started to hear trauma. Okay, I know my patients are traumatized, but I'm hearing trauma patterns in my colleagues and in my friends and in my family. And is it just me or is everybody traumatized? And then I had to be well, if everybody's traumatized, what's going on in me? And it made me start watching myself and watching my own mind and seeing those patterns. And that was part of the process of recognition of these brain systems being not only predictably operating a certain way, but that we could actually change the way we think about those things. And that really boiled down to empathy. I use the love skill for empathy to help myself remember how to use empathy. So the L is listen and look with suspended judgment. Okay. So we all know that our version of reality, now we know that our version of reality is only a very small, external, limited interpretation of what's going on. Even if a person talks to you for an hour, you still only have a small sense of what's going on in their life and what's programmed them, right?
Right.
So if you have no background, then you have even less information about what's actually happening with that person.
Right.
So listen and look with suspended judgment, put your little version to the side. O, observe the emotions in yourself and the other person. Put a word to those emotions. I can't tell you how many times, especially when I was first starting with this, where it might take me a whole day or two to be like, oh, I was feeling embarrassed, or I was feeling disregarded or disrespected or jealous.
Minimize.
Yeah, it's one of those things that because we haven't developed the vocabulary for it, we often don't recognize why I'm feeling this internal experience. So being able to actually speak about all of our emotions are really important. So that's one thing you can do with your kids and your family and with your son. Like, and when, especially if it's an anger word, anger is like the leaves of the tree. So we know, irritable, pissed, mad, all that stuff. We got plenty of words for anger, but anger is an umbrella emotion. If you shook the leaves off that tree, the branches underneath are disgust, embarrassment, guilt, shame, and all of those things that people, like when we start trying to talk about racism, folks get riled up and they oh, you're accusing me of this or you're accusing me of that, instead and not recognizing that defensiveness is coming from deeper
Another
emotions.
place.
Exactly, that they're not even fully aware of in the moment. And so V, validate the differing perspectives and beliefs that are at play. You do not have to agree with somebody to validate what they're talking about. If you grew up in a primarily white household that have a cursory knowledge of slavery and what has happened in America, but your textbooks have been whitewashed and your media has been fed where you have people that you trust and believe saying that racism is not a thing, then when you come and you say some dumb shit like racism is not a thing, if I go off on you, I'm not going to convince you.
Right. Right. Right.
But if I can validate and get more information and understand where you're coming from and like what are your sources and why do you believe what you believe, and also maybe get you to understand your internal processes, then I'm much more likely to be able to engage you to hear the E, which is be effective and be effective with your words, effective with your language. So that's being skillful creator. So the E is express yourself skillfully. And I call everyone creators because that's what we are, just down to the core of what we are. Beyond human, we're creators. What we say has, what you think has an invisible effect on what you feel. What you say flies out of your face and has to make it across space into this other person's brain and be interpreted the way that you think that you mean things. And often there's information lost because you got to get through all of this biology we talked about in them and their
Your own
background.
experiences,
Exactly.
all of those things. Yes.
Exactly. So unless you really know and are intentional about how you are responding to the other person, you're not going to be able to get them to find the middle ground. But if you approach it with love, and even I don't have to like you to know that you're human just like me, we're connected. There's a part of me that loves you, that cares about you, even if I want to slap you, and I want that part of me to be better and to be what is presenting itself, not the animal that wants to cuss you out because you over here saying dumb stuff. So that's where I have to take responsibility.
Please correct me if I'm not calling the right brain part. Because I always call that when you want to just snap into that mode, just go straight there. We're doing medulla oblongata, that whole basic human, I'm trying to survive, so I'm gonna cut you like a fish and leave you there.
Yeah. It is the primitive brain, but it's not the medulla oblongata. But overall, the primitive brain and the primitive behavior is what you see dominating our society. Look at our politics. Look at the way we make decisions. People, like I tell folks, when you lack empathy, you are emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically blind. You legitimately cannot see the real and painful experiences of other people because you're only trapped in your own little bubble of perception, your own biology, your own way of thinking and doing things, to the point where we have so many people who think like that, that we have elected leaders who think in that same primitive way, which has very real and devastating consequences. I experienced the Texas snowpocalypse just like the rest of Texas, because our leadership is primitive, and they lack empathy for the lives and the experiences of other people outside of their own small bubbles of perception.
Yes. Okay. So that is a very good place to just kind of set the stage for, being a more engaged listener with people. And I know there are other non-medicinal modalities that are used. And I do want friends and family that if you have a loved one, encouraging them to get treatment to heal their brain. And my favorite is EMRD, and I used to call it something else. I used to get the letters all twisted up. Where you're, I call it watching the movie of trauma to lessen your brain's response to it. When you believe you're being triggered or having that flashback. So can you talk about how that works with the brain?
Sure. So eye movement and rapid desensitization treatment, EMRD, and that is just one of the type of treatment modalities that have been shown to be helpful for people who experience PTSD and trauma. And cognitive processing therapy is another really useful tool that helps to explore patterns of thinking and behavior, and helping people to rethink their thoughts, basically. Kind of when you have experienced something, they really help you hone in on what beliefs are you telling yourself about that thing, and then how might those beliefs be damaging you, and how can we reassess what we tell ourselves about things. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, is another wonderful one. I think everybody should get DBT. When I had to learn DBT to teach it to my veterans, I was like, that was part of what made me realize, like, oh crap, like this is basic stuff, like recognizing emotions. Why do people have to be diagnosed with PTSD, struggling with substances or struggling with eating disorders and all kinds of other things, before we start giving basic information about how our emotions work, how to recognize them, and how to communicate through those emotions? Because what happens, and this is before I even understood the brain side of it, when your amygdala, I wrestle my amygdala every day. I had to wrestle it this morning. My kids made me so mad. And I'm like, I'm sitting here trying to get ready for this thing. And y'all, I done got you breakfast and all this stuff. Y'all in here arguing, what
Right.
And you become less effective in your words and your thinking. Your mind becomes muddled, befuddled. And if you don't have a strategy for delivering effective words and effective behaviors, then you are likely to just be operating on that combination, that primitive brain input, versus thinking about what are my short and my long-term goals. My short-term goal is to be up here on time, but my long-term goal is not damage my kids by going off, when they're doing things that are getting on my nerves. So I said, I need to go back and apologize. But anyway, the point is that it's internal self-work. So what I tell people is that in addition to therapy and maybe even medication, you still need to learn about your brain. So I actually created an online membership-based academy, and that's available at da-tri.org. And that's DATRI, Dr. Alaluna Trauma Recovery Institute, da-tri.org. And the reason that I created that is because I wanted to put educational content. I try to make it fun, make it a little funny, make it engaging, but it's self-paced learning. There's videos in there that basically explain empathy skills practice for traumatized humans, which is my foundational methodology that helps people to understand these brain systems and how they affect the way you process information. And not only that, but what skills can you use to work yourself out, pop that trauma bubble, activate your prefrontal cortex and evolve in the way that you think and respond. Because the first thing you have to understand what's going on in here. It's not everybody else that's doing it, but our brains are so powerful that, we're told, oh, if I'm hearing something or seeing something or, other people don't understand what I'm going through, that I must be crazy or I must be damaged or I must be broken. No, your brain is working just fine. Just ain't nobody told you what it's doing and why it's doing
Right.
it. And then you can learn to have better control over those responses and those reactions and recenter yourself in reality. So we can't avoid that traumatic things happen, but we certainly can learn how to shift what we tell
Our
ourselves
response
about it.
to it.
Yeah.
Wow. Would you, and gosh, the time, where did the time go? One thing that I have noticed is that in our society, that anger is this boogeyman that, you take anger management classes, and I read a book, The Dance of Anger. I'm not sure if I have the title correct. And one of the things that I really took away from it was anger is a signal that something's not right. And we have been trained in society to think that if you get angry about something, situation, something someone said, all of those things, that, you have to control it. And that's all people say. Well, you have to control your anger. Yeah. And you talked about, anger is the leaves. And once you shake the tree and the leaves are gone, then we start seeing where the anger is coming from. Is it shame? Is it something else deeper that ended up happening that is making this bubble up? Because your brain is trying to tell you, hey, time out, something's not right. And gosh, I'm signing up because I'm like you, DBT. I just quickly looked it up, and throughout this entire conversation, because I studied Buddhism for a short period of time while working on a book, and you brought up so many things that took me back to those basic principles and teachings of perception is all in our mind. It's all what we're creating, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it is 100% factual real. Yeah. It's our emotions. It's how we feel. It's how we're perceiving it.
That amygdala is powerful. And to complete the analogy that I gave of the tree, with anger being the leaves and emotions, other emotions being underneath that, they all funnel into the trunk, which is fear, but at the root is love. And that's because we do not have education about emotions. We think, how can people who do such horrific things or such evil things still have love within them? It's in all of us. We love something. You love someone, even if it's you loving yourself or your family or tribe. Right. And whatever it is that people believe, they believe it because they believe that that's the way that they are properly loving the people or the things that they care about. But that also can be very dysfunctional love, which I think is clear that a lot of us operate. And even us that have worked on ourselves, we still have room to go in making our love healthy and making our caring of other people really deeper and better. Because when we have an empathetic society, we have a society that wouldn't allow people to die because we don't want to put the money into winterizing our electrical grid, or wouldn't allow people to starve because they're laid off from their jobs during a pandemic and can't pay their rent. They would be more interested in that than Dr. Seuss. There are just things that we have to work on with the empathy aspect of things, because it's not taught. But the good news is that it can't, not only can it be taught, It can be learned, it can be practiced, and it can become a skill that helps us this generation. We don't have to wait another 400 years to make the progress that we need to make.
Right.
We can do it now.
Start making it today.
We need it
Yes.
yesterday.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, Dr. Curry, thank you so much for your time. Oh, I need you to come back and talk about so many other things because, gosh, you hit it right on the head with lacking the empathy, focusing just on our emotions, and that one magical phrase that you said that makes my skin just crawl. You made me insert whatever emotion or action in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody made you do anything.
Nobody
put a gun to you. Nobody took your arm. You were not Geppetto here. There are no strings. Yes.
That was you and your amygdala.
You and your brain in there decided that, this is the route that I'm going to go. So thank you so much for sharing your time. And guys, please definitely check out her website, her subscription service.
And they can find me on Facebook as well. They can follow the Dr. Alaluna trauma psychiatrist page. And that's where I have information about all the stuff that I do, some of the interviews that I've done. And I have a Woman Heal Thyself event on March 27th from 10:30 to noon, where we're going to Central Standard Time, where we're going to go deeper into specifically how women can help heal each other in this challenging world. Sisters got to help heal sisters. So these are strategies on what you can do for yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. Because I will definitely say, living in a patriarchal society, women can reinforce those negative things, and we can tear each other down. And again, back to that conversation, normalizing bullying. My guest, I said, we actually are the epitome of Black culture right now with dark skin versus light skin. I can't tell you how many fights I had growing up because, you got good hair and all this BS that we do to hurt each other instead of saying, I love you because you crack jokes and help disarm people and make the moment not so heavy. Or you have the most beautiful Hershey's kissed skin I've ever seen. And just saying, this is what I love about you versus saying, she just thinks when she walks in the room, she just owns everything.
Projecting so much of our own pain onto other people and causing pain and damage in them.
Yes. So definitely, guys, I have posted her website at the bottom in the comments section. And March 27th, I want to make sure that I have the date correct. Woman Heal Thyself at 10 o'clock.
10:30. 10:30. And I'll drop you a link too. And when we get off.
Please do that. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for giving your time and coming on the show. And next week, we are going to talk about bond projects and is there a formula to win? So I have friend and guests from Ed Gray's show on Cecil Lofton to talk about, getting out there and getting those government contracts and what is the secret success behind it. So again, everyone, as I close every show, spend time with those that matter to you based in love, and let's show that love and kindness to others. Again, Dr. Curry, thank you so much for your time and your words and explanation and education on how our brains can sometimes get us in trouble when we are not informed. It's fantastic. So until next time, everybody.